Welcome back to Cashlight Tales. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and share the link to support our channel. Follow many more heart-wrenching horror stories. With us is Ella, the girl from Margaret who sees fear more than any other part of her. Ella, before we started all of this, can I start by telling you a little bit about your life? What is it like to live in a quiet beach town?
I have lived in Margaret my whole life, and to be honest, it feels like nothing is happening here. It's quiet, unpredictable, nothing exciting, but everything changed overnight. I didn't know it at the time, but instead, I imagined the future. There were far worse things happening.
That night, can you explain it, a time when things changed?
It was just a normal evening, as we all know. I stayed up late with my brother Max playing Fortnite like any other night. The room is dark except for the TV. We laughed and joked, and when I told him I didn't know how to explain it, it feels wrong.
How are you? What exactly is making you feel sick?
It starts with a step, not a normal pace. Did you know that when someone walks up the stairs, how can you tell the timing? This was different, slow, deliberate. Almost everyone who came up didn't want it. I heard that we froze. We went back and forth and my heart pounded. At first I thought it was my mother. So he tried to wake us up late.
I could only imagine the fear. What happened next?
We were silent, too afraid to make a sound. We tried to look through the crack in the door but couldn't see who it was. Then I saw it. A shadow, so enormous it seemed to reach into the sky. Almost unreal, creeping through our door like Peter Pan thumbs up, not just a kid. It was something else I told Max to shut up about. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was completely detached from my body, on the edge.
Dangerous, and the door was slammed?
Yes. The shadow darted down the stairs, and the front door slammed shut with such force, I think the house will collapse. We both ran to the door to check, and it was closed with a latch, and no one inside was able to open it. It was like something was playing with us.
I'm sure that will haunt you, but then Carnival comes to town, right? Is it your escape?
Yes, carnivals are a distraction. The lights, the music, the people. It's like another world. It stopped me from the fear that still lingered after that night. That's where I met Leo.
Oh, how did Leo come into the picture? Was it love at first sight?
It feels like... At first it was a little fun, you know? He was charming, and I wanted something more. Something that made me feel alive again after everything I had. It happened while he was looking at me. It was like he was looking straight through me.
Have you ever questioned why it feels so intense and fast? Do you understand that there is nothing wrong with Leo?
I do, but when we kissed, everything seemed to fade away. Feels like in a dream. But later that night, strange things began to happen again. I woke up in a cold sweat. It feels like there's someone in the room right there. Standing there, he looked at me. I told Leo about this, and he seemed really worried.
I offered to spend the night with you to help out, right? Are you comfortable?
It's both. On the one hand, I felt safe with him, but on the other hand, I felt like he knew too much about what I was going through. It was like he was watching me. That night, he stayed the night, and we were close to that moment. They wanted to destroy it.
But when you opened the door, there was nothing, just darkness.
That's right, there's no one there, but I don't feel okay. Then I feel strangely familiar. With Leo, he knew this house very well, too much about me, about my fear, about me, not even tell him.
What an amazing interview. Did Leo confess anything? Is there something you can't see?
I confronted him. I should have known. He told me he had a past, but then Max appeared, and everything began to unravel. Max was right. He was always trying to protect me.
It's a really cool idea. But now you know, right? It's a true story about lions. It's the shadow that follows you.
Yes, I've learned to trust my instincts. Max was right. He's always there for me, even when I can't see him. But the fear, the powerlessness, is still there, the shadow. They never really disappear from Leo. Leo lied. That's right. Everything stopped and I was just a pawn in his game. Yes, I've learned to trust my instincts. Max was right. He's always there for me, even when I can't see him. But the fear, the powerlessness, is still there, the shadow. They never really disappear from Leo. Leo lied. That's right. Everything stopped and I was just a pawn in his game.
Do you think you will find peace, Ella? Or will the shadow be a part of you forever?
I don't know. Maybe the shadow has always followed me. Maybe we have to pay for curiosity. But one thing is certain, no matter how dark it is outside, I won't run away from it. I will face it.
There's a powerful interview, Ella. Thank you for sharing your story. And let's not forget our listeners. Sometimes what's hidden in the dark isn't as far away as you think. Open your eyes wide. And it's hard to believe.
A few years ago, Sarah's life seemed very ordinary. She has a modest home in Riverside. It is a quiet suburb outside the big city. She lives with her husband, Jake, and her sister, Lily. The house is small and cramped, but it was full of family noises, laughter, arguments, and the quiet moans of everyday life. But there was a moment of silence throughout the house. It's like a thick fog that you can't shake. It was an early autumn evening that Sarah first noticed something was wrong. The golden warmth of the setting sun faded to a pale gray, and the world outside the window seemed to shrink into shadows. Inside the house, Sarah and Jake sat side by side. Wrapped in a thin blanket, the hum of an old TV filled the air. Outside, the suburban street was quiet. The only sound was the rustling of leaves on the sidewalk. It was a night that felt like it would last forever, peaceful and uneventful. But that night would be the beginning of a horror that would soon take their lives. A sudden ringing sound from Lily's room broke the silence. The sound wasn't just loud, but it also cut through the still air with startling clarity. "Mother." The voice was clear, familiar, yet strangely tense. Jake and Sarah exchanged glances. Confusion appeared on their faces. They'd both heard it, but Lily was nowhere near the kitchen. In fact, when they turned to look, she was standing in the kitchen with Mom, talking with friends casually. "Mother?" The voice was clear, familiar, yet strangely confusing. "Mother?" The voice was clear, familiar, yet strangely confusing. "Mother?" "No." The voice was nowhere near the kitchen. In fact, when they turned to look, they found Teddy Bear and Lady Mahoney already there. She stood up, not sure what was happening. "Lily?" Sarah called softly. Her voice was barely a whisper. Lily turned around and frowned in confusion. "What? I didn't say anything." But Sarah knew what she had heard. Lily's voice came clearly from her bedroom. But here she was standing in front of them. The logical explanation disappeared into the cool air of the kitchen. Jake immediately stood up. His face turned pale. "But we heard you, Lily. You called Mom." Lily looked back and forth between them, clearly confused. "I'm not complaining," she said slowly in a soft voice. "I swear to you." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. Her body betrayed a growing uneasiness. There was no reasonable explanation for what happened. How could they hear Lily's voice so clearly if she didn't speak? The house suddenly became louder, felt smaller, the air thicker, as if it was closing in on them. There was a feeling that Sarah couldn't shake, a creeping feeling that something was watching them. Nothing has passed for many days. There is only a feeling of insecurity. Sarah stayed in my heart. She began to notice little things that she couldn't explain. The door closed for no reason, and strange feelings hidden at the edge of her picture. A shadow in the corner of the room watching. Waiting, but perhaps what's most unsettling is Jake. He's changed. The warm connection they once shared has slipped away. He could almost smell her. Never-ending perfume, and no confrontation, no description. There was only silence that stretched like an impregnable wall between them. One evening, after a tiring day, Sarah decides to seek refuge at home. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. The silence was oppressive, filling the room with an unnatural stillness. The flickering light of the TV did little to relieve the tension in the air. And then Sarah heard a voice coming from Lily's bedroom. It was a whisper so soft, it was almost imperceptible. It felt like a soft breath against her ear. But it's not a mistake. This time it wasn't Lily's voice, but it was a different voice. Sarah. Her name echoed throughout the empty, and unnatural house. Sarah's body stiffened. My breath caught in my throat. She knew she had to investigate, but a primal feeling of fear held her back. She felt her heart beat quickly and erratically, with a strong pounding in her chest as her feet automatically moved towards the source of the sound. The hallway in Lily's room was dark. Sarah hesitated as she reached the door. The oppressive silence of the house was getting to her. She could feel the cool air blowing into the hallway from inside. Make it cooler than it should be. She opened the door and stepped inside. This room was cooler than any other room in the house, the air thick and dense, which seemed to pulsate with the rhythm of her rapid heartbeat. The dimmest light from the hallway barely illuminated the room, casting long shadows on the wall, but Lily wasn't there. A chill ran down Sarah's spine as she stared at the closet. The door opened slightly, and the darkness within seemed to call to you. There was something hidden in that black void, something that isn't there. With a force she could not explain, Sarah took a step forward. She reached the closet door and the air was thick and suffocating. She opened it with one swift movement, and the dim light inside revealed only a few scattered pieces of clothing and shoes. Their colors faded in the dim light. But then she saw it. Something moved in the corner of her eye. The shadows are darker than the rest, creaking noise behind fabric. The voice was soft, but not distorted. It was as if someone or something was breathing behind the cloak. Sarah took a quick step back and gasped. The freezing breath of an invisible entity hit her neck. She turned, but there was nothing there. "Sarah," the voice whispered again. This time it came closer. It was a cold, familiar whisper that crawled across her skin. The strange events continued. A house that was once a place to relax has become a prison. The boundaries between reality and something dark begin to blur, and Sarah is questioning everything, whether it is her mental health, trust in her husband, a growing fear of what awaits beyond the veil of the normal world. And on that last night, the true horror is revealed. Jake leaves again, by returning later than usual. But this time, Sarah was determined to face him. She waited, heart pounding, hands shaking, when Jake finally came. He smelled the unfamiliar perfume again. "Where have you been?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking with fear and anger. Jake looked at her, his expression strange. His eyes were blank, as if he didn't even exist. He doesn't speak, he doesn't answer, but he walked past her. His movements were jerky and unnatural, like a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. It was then that Sarah noticed something she had never seen before. A small shadow approaching the corner of the room. The temperature in the room dropped as she squeezed from all sides, and Sarah felt a cold hand grip her heart. Suddenly, a whisper filled the air and overpowered her. "Sarah! Sarah! You shouldn't have come back." At that moment, she understood. A house is never a home. That's a trap, where the veil between the living and the dead begins to thin. And it's rooted in something unspeakable. What about Jake? He wasn't her husband, not at all. He was something else, something darker, something twisted by the shadows that haunt their lives. When the door closed behind her and sealed her inside, Sarah finally realized that the house was not open to anyone. The whispers lingered in the shadows, haunts the quiet streets of Riverside. This house stands tall, quietly witness of the horrors that took place within its walls. Sarah F. Her fate is still unknown, stuck between the realms of the living and the dead, swallowed forever by the shadows.